right, so this is the beginning of our proposed operating budget for FY 2027. We are looking to kind of throw it right out there and sum it up. We're looking at 91-cent increase to the mill rate with all the taxing agents as currently proposed or presented. With the count working our way down the list, the county is about a 12-cent mill rate impact, coming in at $1,713,305. And again, this is a taxing flow through. We receive a warrant from them. You don't have a say on their budget in this capacity. The RSU 5 is proposing $25,815,154, which equates currently to a 55-cent impact to the mill rate. Our Metro Transit tax, which again is another pass-through warrant, is just rounded up to a penny impact on the mill rate at $131,547. And the one that you have control over is the town of Freeport's municipal budget, coming in or being proposed at a mill rate impact of 24 cents at a tax amount of $8,970,455, which is a 7.55% levy increase. And we'll get into some of the differences between levy and tax in just a minute. So looking at the budget expenditures, the actual budget for the town is increasing $776,635. If you look back at this screen, the tax change is $629,835. So this is where I'm talking between, kind of flipping between the tax levy impact and the budget impact, okay? So $629,835 is the tax impact change. $776,635 is the budget impact change, so for the expenditures. So the things that are driving that increase primarily relate to, as we all know, wages and benefits. They're, over 80% of your budget. And that comes in at $464,800, and that includes things like our contractual step increases, cost of living, the differences with retirements and vacancies and those being filled, and any pay scale or realignments that may occur in that sense. We also have an increase in debt service this year based on the fire truck bond that was approved. That increased your debt service $150,000 this year. We also have an increase of just over $128,000 for some contracted services. So we, our software provider, it's Tyler Technologies Enterprise ERP, but it's formally known as Munis. So we have transitioned to the cloud, and so that's an increase. A portion of this 128 is an increase of switching that service from being on site to the cloud, which you're not immediately seeing the savings because we'll no longer have to maintain that server. So there are offsets to some of these that hit the capital that, we won't need to upgrade that server under the capital plan. But it includes the Munis transfer to the cloud. The Vision is also now on the cloud, the assessing software, and so that's an increase in their contracted rate, as well as cleaning services to include the library, and an increase with dispatch services with Brunswick. Buston's Island, we're projecting a $46,000 increase in what gets paid out to them. And then a few miscellaneous expenses, which is actually a decrease of $45,000. It includes a reduction to the paving line within the budget. It removes the $25,000 for the abatements that we usually budget for, and we will be relying solely on what the assessor sets as overlay. So because overlay is designed to cover your abatements requests that may come forth, Freeport historically has just always tried to supplement that with, because typically you don't, historically over 10 years, you don't get even 25,000 in abatements. I mean, you have some years that spike, you have some that are really low. So we would just use that again to kind of help with the capital plan, right? We have 25,000 that will kind of cover and allow the overlay to go to fund the capital. And that's offset by utility cost increases. So those three things kind of net to a $45,000 decrease to the expenses.
Do you mind if I ask a couple questions?
I don't mind at all.
What's the total, can you remind me the total debt service that we'll peak at? And was that because it was a partial year? Is that why we're increasing 150,000?
So in FY26, you recognize just the interest portion based on when on the payment schedule.
Yep.
And so yes, FY27 is the first year of the principal component of that. So this, going forward, you'll slowly start to see it reduce because the interest will go down annually.
Yeah, so what's the total debt service?
273,000, I believe, right around there.
All right.
Yep.
And then.
That's principal and interest.
Yep. And can you remember the term again? Was it 15 years?
10.
10.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
It was 1.5 million, so.
Great. And then were the miscellaneous expense adjustments, were those as an effort to make the increase
Yes.
look better? Or was that an actual, like, we found some areas in the paving budget that we don't need, or is it,
No.
or you got to sharpen your pencil?
So my interpretation, and Sophie can disagree or state hers if she would like after. My interpretation is that the paving reduction and abatement removal were solely to assist in proposing a more in line budget with what we felt expectations were. I personally, with the paving reduction, that's a tough one, and I had conversations with Sophie on that because prices are going up. But timing-wise and staffing and how much you're able to get done, ultimately this is what we agreed on, that if we had to get by and do, we could get by and do.
Okay. Yeah.
So can I give it a little, let me tell a story. Can I tell a story? So my story is that when Jessica left on her,
Conference.
to go to her conference, we were up $1,091,000 in the budget. And Jessica had done an amazing job asking department heads to sharpen the pencils, really think. We had spent a lot of time on that. I brought them back through, I don't know if anybody's been in my office, but I have butcher block paper stuck to the walls where we went through exercises to talk about what had already been left off the budget that they would have otherwise asked for if they followed best practice. We talked about, were there things that they would identify that if council needed to find more savings in the budget as potential things that we could do that would decrease the service level, though, that would have that impact. The other thing we talked about was looking at your budget. Are there things that we may think about doing differently that we could internally continue to operate and not overstress our resources, but that would not show as like a service decrease to the community? Might be some, but it would be negligible. And so what we came up with were some places where we are pulling back some of the contingency that we had had. So these are things that, with an extra $75,000 in the paving budget, as an example, Earl had the ability when council said, ooh, this is a problem, or a community member said, oh, there's a stretch of road. A good example of that is up on South Street, where we laid down a bunch of pavement. It's not a job, there's an issue. that money allows him the ability to do that. We are conservatively pulling that back because I'm very nervous that there are times that you go through cycles and you have less need and then you have more need. And so I don't want to create a situation where we're partway through a year and have a massive need that we now have to say we have a huge emergency, right? So we're dialing that back. We knew we were going through a transition with the town engineer. So we pulled money out of that account that still allows us to keep Albert and here for task-based. So he is not assigned here for 20 hours a week or anything like that. It is truly task-based. When we have projects, he works. When we don't, he doesn't. And we think it leaves enough money for that, not a ton of extra in there. A counselor and that I'm not even sure is on council anymore, but I didn't ask for a name, and a resident asked for additional striping on Upper Mass Landing Road. And I said, that's $3,000. It is not critical to our need. We're operating as we are. I think we should pull that out unless there is a larger striping discussion. So that came out. I met with every department head over the last 3 months and talked about staffing. And to be able to determine for council, be able to say to you, here are positions that if they come available, we might consider changes. And during those conversations, most of those discussions yielded a significant, depending on the department, I think to the department, a significant service level impact to do that. The Public Works Department, given technology and availability with some back office space by repurposing finance people, we are in a position to be able to support Public Works, and by dropping the Public Works position from a 36-hour-a-week position to a 20-hour-a-week position. In doing that, it means that we would be asking people to make appointments to speak to the Public Works Director and the Deputy Director, which I don't think is outside of what people should expect. It will save us approximately $40,000 a year to make that change. That is, and then I went through a painful history of the customs and the history of how we give cost of living raises, how we propose them, not you actually give them, we propose them. And we normally would put 3% in the budget because that's what the collective bargaining unit's minimum was for this year. It was 2.7 CPI, which is what we normally follow. We are proposing 2.5%, which saves, I think by the time you calculate it all the way out, it's about $90,000 in the budget. So those were just things that we came up with that cut about $400,000 out of the budget total when you go through all of those things. The goal that Jessica and I had, and I really want to commend Jessica because she did a great job working with department heads, forecasting, and was very receptive to some of my zany ideas. But our intent through all of this was to present the town council with what we thought we needed to be able to continue to provide the current service level. We are here to support your discussion as we move forward. Did I answer?
Yeah, that's great. I
So-
love a good story. My last question is, can you explain the Buston's Island, 46,000?
Yes, so I'm gonna say 40%, if I have the percentage right, 40% of the tax, 60, I knew I was gonna get it backwards. 60% of what comes in for tax revenue gets returned to Bustins, as part of I'll say maybe a longstanding agreement between what they get for services and what we bring in for having their valuations as part of the town. And so what we do is, I have to do the calculation of what their valuation is by the mill rate, less any outstanding taxes that haven't been paid, less outstanding ones that were paid from the prior year. So it's a whole mathematical equation of what they actually end up getting. And with this year's projected budget and what remains outstanding for taxes due, it's about a $46,000 increase.
Huh. Could we at some point actually go through the calculation? Because
For sure.
I'd really like to see it. I mean, maybe we could do it on Monday.
Sure.
Because something doesn't seem right.
So I will tell you, I've flagged this. I've actually asked for a little bit of legal guidance to make sure that we are, so Jessica is doing the math that was handed down to her. The agreement started in 1986. I asked the attorney to make sure that we are following the agreement the right way. But when you get done, by the time you've collected their $665,000 worth of taxes, we have about $634,000 left. We're giving them about $380,000 out of this calculation, which is an amalgam of years of value, and which leaves us about $250,000. Okay, that's what we have left in our coffer. We then, for their value, are paying out $446,000 to the RSU. They're 70% of their tax bill, and another $2,200 to the Transit Authority, which in my very fast math, which we can Smith, we're already in the hole about $195,000 before we have even thought about what we're collecting for municipal services. So we are subsidizing Bustins Island. And as their values grow, which they're growing faster because they're waterfront property, what we owe them, the mill rate is a piece of that, but as their value increases, the amount that we owe them back increases.
So we don't have to go into that in great detail right now, but just to clarify, the agreement that's from 1986 did not adjust for the fact that when we created the RSU, that
Yeah.
percentage of taxes is not being refunded. I mean, so the
Right,
RSU is not
in
getting them
1986,
back
the
there.
school was a department of the town, so there was no
Right.
calculation, I
But-
thought.
Right, but I guess when we created the RSU, we didn't account for the fact that
Correct.
we are collecting those taxes, but 70% of that is a pass-through that we don't have the ability to refund except out of our own
Correct.
budget. I think that is the issue with assuming that the historical agreement can simply go forward when there's a large portion of that that isn't really ours to refund.
Correct.
And I will say, I know that, just putting on sort of the other perspective here, they don't send kids to school.
Neither do a lot of
Yeah.
the people who pay property taxes in Freeport.
So that was a back of the envelope analysis. I will work with Jessica to formulate that, but I'm also hoping just to understand, at this point, we have an agreement. My assumption is that whatever we do will likely involve either status quo or conversations with Bustins. But we just want to flag this for you because it's a pretty large expenditure that seems beyond, I think, it would seem to me the intent would be, if we're going to refund, it would be 60% of what would otherwise be collected for. Yeah, which we would normally collect about 160,000.
Yeah, I like the way Eric framed it as we're just the agent who's collecting the tax on behalf of the school, and that I would think was not the spirit of the original agreement, that it was the municipal tax that we would be refunding, but worth
Yeah.
looking into and talking about.
And I think the other piece that will be really interesting for our historian over here is to go back to 1986 and to see what the percentage shifts were.
So there's that. And it sounds like there might be a conversation Monday.
For sure.
So what I've heard so far is that you've, through the internal process with staff before coming to council, you basically trimmed $400,000 of potential budget impact. Yeah.
We also looked at revenues. I think that's a thing that we're not comfortable. I think we have some recommendations as we go through to look at maybe some increases, but we also did, Jessica stepped outside of her conservative role and increased some of our revenues as well to bridge that gap.
All right.
So the other side, so talking about the budget expenditure impact of 776,000, it's offset by a budgeted revenue impact of 146,800. So those two together get you down to that 629,835 levy increase that you see for the municipal services. And the major drivers on the revenue side is we're projecting a revenue sharing decrease of 167,436. We've reduced reliance on the impact fee by 81,000. Outside my comfort zone, we increased excise tax by 250,000, recognizing with the new TIF an additional 75,000 in revenue. And then there were smaller miscellaneous revenue increases that included adjustments to building fees, road assistance, and recycling revenues.
We had mentioned, we probably had the same thought, Councillor Pillsbury, but the revenue sharing decrease, you had mentioned that at a finance committee meeting, and we were going to keep an eye on it. Do you have any more insight on the
They haven't
change?
done another projection yet.
Okay.
No,
So that
I don't
might
expect.
change?
What's that?
That might change?
I don't think so. I
Okay.
reached out to Kate Dufour with MMA on the legislative side, and she looked into it for us, and based on the formula and where we look at our mill rate is lower than the state level for being considered as part of the Rev 2 distribution. So because our mill rate is so low, we're below that value that would allow us to participate in the Rev 2 distribution.
And historically, we participated in Rev 2?
It's been, Rev 2 is newer.
Okay.
It's maybe 5-6 years, maybe, no, not even that long. Oh, more? Okay, sorry. Scratch that. We've kind of ebbed and flowed with it. In the last 5 years is where I'll say I meant to say this. In the last 5 years, I think 2 we haven't participated in, but they were much smaller impacts because of where we were at economically, right? So
So that must be like some complicated formula.
Well, the formula takes our state full value, which means the state takes the calculation of our ratio and applies it to our values so that everybody is being looked at in the same way. And there is a minimum or a maximum mill rate that you can be charged. It used to be 10, but now I think it's like 10.4, and we're like 10.52. So we're just over the mill rate, which is why we fluctuate in and out of that. The idea is, as a service center, our costs are larger than what our property can usually manage, so that's why you get the higher mill rates.
What's the impact fee?
So the town would charge an impact fee for new construction or development.
Oh, got it.
And, yeah.
Now-
And so this would be a portion that we would transfer because you have to use it to maintain, roads and things like that. There's specific purposes for impact fee that we're finding we really shouldn't be doing. So this is the reduction of that reliance.
So the reduction, is the reduction related to the fact that there's not as much activity, or the fact that we changed the way we're calculating it? Am I getting that right?
So we can't do it.
Yeah.
We're just
Okay.
expending what had
What's
been
left.
collected before we were told we can't do that
Got it.
anymore.
And then, not a question, but a point. So like the miscellaneous revenue increases, this is why I think we need to be very mindful as we set fees and look at fees, and we talk about things like, at the transfer station, is the 3 cents a gallon the appropriate amount? I mean, I don't want to nickel and dime things, but my baseline assumption here is that we have to be clear and transparent and fair with our costs and who's paying them and who's getting the benefit of them, because it really does add up, and it comes into play here as we're trying to close a gap. The more additional revenue we have helps decrease the amount that's going to be borne by the taxpayers. So I just say that as a framing to, it may seem like, why are we haggling over $1 on a bag of ice at like Winslow Park? But it all adds up, and it's got to be sound. There's got to be a sound rationale and methodology for how we approach this stuff, and a clear understanding of who's actually bearing the cost of these things. So that's all. Get up.
And to just wrap this up, the net impact is a municipal tax rate impact of $629,835, or 7.55%, where the municipal rate would go from its current 3.47 to a 3.71. And the last slide is just a reminder of what our current schedule is. So coming up on Monday, we have a finance committee meeting, followed by 2 council workshops on May 5th and 12th. Another finance committee meeting on May 18th. It's important to note, or to let the public know, we have public information sessions on May 19th and 20th that are here in council chambers, where any members of the public can come in between these hours and speak directly one-on-one with department heads, where there are no cameras and no public eyes. And some people feel a little more comfortable with it just being a one-on-one discussion, so we try to accommodate that with those 2 meetings. And then, as you determined tonight, there will be a public hearing on this operating budget, June 2nd, with a tentative target date for adoption on June 16th.
Schedule's up on the website in case anybody
Yes,
wants to look at it again.
absolutely.
And I also will echo what I said earlier, which was, if for some reason you can't make any of these times, please reach out via email or otherwise.
Absolutely.
Can you remind me about the structure for the 2 workshops on the 5th and the 12th? Are we going to just break the operating budget into 2 pieces to do that? Or is it going to be with department heads? Like, what's the way we're approaching it?
So, my plan had been to come to the 27th Finance Committee meeting with a proposal for how we break up the rest of it and the questions that that maybe you want to ask. Jessica and I haven't had a chance to talk about
Yeah,
that.
I know historically, we typically break the 2 workshops up, where the first one is primarily with the majority of the department heads, so that if there are follow-up questions or things that need a little bit of research, we can come back for the 12th. And then otherwise, the one on the 12th would be all the other budget segments that are just handled by Sophie and myself, so. That's typically what we've done in the past. I think last year might have been a little different than that, but, yeah.
Great, and just my last comment is appreciate the way that you've put this together in the plan, but also being mindful of, you took a first pass at it, and the number looked like there was room for revision, a thoughtful revision, and I appreciate you doing that as a starting place, instead of just saying, well, this is the number, this is how, it calculated out, let's just start there. I mean, there's already an accountability and ownership, and I think that's just, for everyone who's still here, I think it's really important to say that that's where we're starting from, and there's always thought that goes into it, and these are tough things, but we're starting from a better place. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also need to echo, channel, I've said echo like 4 times tonight, channel my inner John Egan and just call out that this is an award-winning presentation. We cannot forget, so.
All 248 pages
That's
this year.
right, so
So exciting.
I'd be remiss if we didn't celebrate that. So in terms of the goal for tonight, is there anything that you need, Jessica, from council tonight, or do you feel confident with first pass, we're drinking from a fire hose, counselors continue to look at this, we'll meet on Monday. However, we have in the past have welcomed council sending staff questions that are nitty gritty that can be shared out.
Yeah, so we are always happy to answer counselor questions, whether it's a phone call or a stop-in or an email. But one of the things we did find worked really well the first year I was here was to have counselors give us questions that we then put into a document that went back out so that all of the counselors had the benefits of the questions and the answers. It also lets us make sure that Jessica and I are on the same page. And there are elements of the budget that are 100% Jessica and elements that might be a little bit more mine, but then there's the whole, a lot of it that is a collaboration.
Yeah, and I will say for me personally, it's helpful to be able to send the questions as I have them, as I'm reviewing it, instead of, hoping I remember up here. Any other thoughts for Jessica?
I don't want to overwhelm you with the 248 pages, so if I could just take 2 seconds and let you know, the kind of the format of the document is really to give a little bit of history of the town. It then goes into what our form of government is and who's what and where. It gives an overview summary of where we stand on a budget perspective. It talks about a multi-year forecast, which is new this year, so it gives a projection of what we anticipate for the next 10 years, if the budget goes through as is. And then you start to get into the general fund. And, around page maybe 85, it starts going into the individual departments and has narrative from each department head on what they've accomplished over the last 2 years and what they hope to accomplish in the coming year. And then it goes into the other aspects of non-general fund budget. So it goes into Winslow Park, it goes into the capital, and it goes into TIF. And then I'll say probably the major focus, if I had to tell you to go absolutely anywhere, is the last maybe 60 pages of the document, which is the line-by-line items of both the general fund and Winslow Park. So I just didn't want you to feel completely overwhelmed.
I had something else to say, but I've lost it, so I guess that's that.
So what you have coming for the Finance Committee meeting is a memo that Jessica and I are working on that talks about kind of a look back. So we've looked from 2013 to 2027 and have identified some patterns, talked about kind of where some of the growth has come from, and are giving you some ideas, not for necessarily, maybe for this budget, I'm not posing it like that, but that we might want to look at if we wanted to. What I've heard from council is, we don't think this is sustainable to have this kind of growth every year. So how do we kind of deal with that? And Jessica and I need to find some time tomorrow to finalize it, and then we'll go from there.